welcome to the Beth'tilac 10-man heroic guide within the Firelands raid series. This guide will provide a detailed breakdown of the encounter for raid leaders and curious viewers, as well as a summarized strategy with role descriptions if you're only interested in the TLDR. You can find the timestamps for both of these options in the description. Beth'tilac can be found on the western side of the map. In order to get to Beth'tilac, you can either kill the trash mobs which are guarding the boss room, or you can do a simple skip run to bypass the mobs entirely. When doing the skip, you will start on the southern side of Beth'tilac's lair, and go up the hills on the left side of the entrance. Once you've gotten up on the left ridge, you will keep going on the outside of the walls. Follow the outer edge while running slightly into the wall in order to get to the end of the ledge. Once you get to the end, you will find a small hill which you can run up from, and you can enter the Beth'tilac lair from the outside. The encounter is divided into two phases, where phase 1 requires mechanical execution, and phase 2 is a soft and rage phase. We are going to start by looking into the relevant mechanics of each phase before breaking down the execution of the encounter itself. During phase 1, the encounter will be fought on two levels. The raid will be divided into two groups to deal with mechanics on both levels. You will have one group which will do most of their fighting on the upper level of the room, and another which will do all of their fighting on the lower level of the room. On the upper level, the group will be loosely spread around the hole in the center of the platform. On the lower level, the group will be centered around the southwest side of the room, with the exception of the hunter. We will start by going through the mechanics on the lower level. A short while after the boss is pulled, as well as 2 more times during the encounter, cinderweb spinners will descend from the roof. The spinners will be hanging from a thread from the ceiling, and will only get down to the ground if they are taunted. Taunting these is a very high priority. If they are left unattended, they will start channeling a 25-second stun on a random player. Once they are taunted, they will drop a mountable thread hanging from the ceiling, which allows your raid to ascend to the top level. Once the group has reached the top level, you will have to deal with 2 separate mechanics. The first mechanic is called Meteor Burn. When this is cast, Beth'tilac will summon a meteor which crashes towards the position of one of the top players. The meteor will deal damage on impact and leave a fire patch on the ground. Completely avoid standing in any of these fire patches or on the impact site of the meteor itself. As the top team progresses their phase, they will keep moving the boss around the center of the platform in order to avoid the fire patches, while still staying close to the center of the platform. It is very important that you do not step on any of the previous locations of the meteor spawns. If you do so, you will fall through the web and take a lot of fall damage. The second mechanic is called Smoldering Devastation. When cast, Beth'tilac will essentially one-shot anyone who is remaining on the top of the web. When you see Beth'tilac start casting the Smoldering Devastation, make your way to the center of the platform and jump down. Once you've jumped down, you will repeat the first part of the fight while taunting the spinners and going back upstairs. You will repeat this cycle 3 times in total until we reach phase 2. Before we take a look at what happens in phase 2, we're going to talk about the ground team and how they handle phase 1. For the ground team, phase 1 is essentially just an ad management phase. The first ad are the cinderweb spinners, which we've briefly touched upon before. When these are on the ground, you should simply pick them up with the off tank. Apart from the spinners, the off tank will be responsible for tanking the cinderweb drone, which spawns once for every cast of Smoldering Devastation. The cinderweb drone itself has 2 mechanics which are of importance. First, the cinderweb drone will spew out a frontal cone on the raid. This means that the off tank should face the drone away from the group as often as they can. The cinderweb drone also randomly fixates on a target on the bottom floor. Once fixated upon, the player should simply run over to the off tank and tank the hits from the drone. A passive mechanic on the Cinderweb drone is in relation to the second type of ad called Cinderweb Spiderlings. If the drone comes in contact with the spiderlings, it will eat them and thus restore a bunch of HP. The simple way to handle this mechanic is to make sure that the Cinderweb drone never gets close to the Cinderweb spiderlings. The Cinderweb spiderlings spawn in packs around the edge of the room. They can spawn from one of 3 locations as indicated on the picture. The spiderlings will spawn from the same location in sets of 3. Once the third set is spawned, the spawn location can change or become the same one again. The way to deal with these ads is for your hunter with entrapment spec to simply put down a slowing trap on top of them, and then for all ranged DPS to cleave them down as soon as possible. This should always be your highest priority on the ground floor. While the spiderlings are being killed by the ranged DPS, the melee DPS should cleave down the spinners as well as killing the drone on the off tank. The final type of ad that spawns on the ground floor during phase 1 are called engorged broodlings and can be distinguished from the spiderlings by their yellow appearance. They spawn in the same packs as the spiderlings, but have slightly different mechanics. The broodlings will fixate on a player and run towards them. Once the broodling comes in contact with any player, they will explode and leave a puddle which does big damage on the ground. Due to this mechanic, the hunter wants to position themselves outside of the group and try to catch the broodlings as they are approaching the group, thus leaving the puddles outside of the area. If executed properly, the entire stacking point of the raid should be cleared from puddles and it will make phase 2 a lot easier. Healers, make sure to keep the hunter healthy at all times as they will take a lot of damage. And hunters, you are urged to use deterrence, disengage, and raptor strike with your glyph as often as you can. We will now look into the second and final phase of the fight. At the start of phase 2, Beth'tilac will lower herself down to the ground floor. The raid will prioritize to quickly finish off any spiderlings, as any left alive will heal Beth'tilac for a lot of HP. Once all spiderlings are cleared out, you're going to position yourself in a triangle pattern around Beth'tilac. The tanks will stand on opposite corners and the raid will stand behind the boss. During this phase, you only have 2 mechanics you have to worry about. However, it's important to note that the boss's damage output will increase substantially over the duration of this phase. This means that you need to kill the boss as soon as you possibly can. The first mechanic is called Ember Flare. It is the same ability as Beth'tilac is using on the top team during phase 1. It will simply do raid-wide damage on an interval of approximately 10 seconds. As the fight progresses and Beth'tilac's damage ramps up, this will start hurting your raid quite a bit, and this is a good time to use raid cooldowns once you get towards the end of the fight. The second mechanic is called Widow's Kiss and is a mechanic purely for the tanks. Once cast, it will apply a debuff to the tank, which causes them to pulse AoE damage in a close proximity and take reduced healing. The easiest way to get rid of this mechanic is to simply conduct a tank swap. If you are running with a default composition of having a Blood DK as main tank and Feral as off tank, you can just taunt this off with your Feral and then you can go back into cat form to optimize your DPS. The cadence of this fight revolves around using your cooldowns well. The damage will ramp, and if you use your cooldowns too soon, you will most likely die. Patience here is going to be key, so try to maximize the time where you can play without cooldowns and only hold them for a sticky situation. Repeat this process and hit the boss until it's dead. This marks the end of the breakdown of the Beth'tilac 10-man heroic guide. The upcoming section will provide a TLDR for anyone who wants a basic formula to how to get this encounter done. Either you will have a raid composition consisting of 2 healers, 2 tanks, and 6 DPS, or you will simply move one of the DPS over to healer for this part. Divide the raid into 2 groups, one top group and one bottom group. Pre-shield the entire raid and stack up for barrier on pull. Pull the boss with Fairy Fire from your druid, and wait for spinners to spawn. Once the spinners have spawned, you need to taunt them down from the webs so that the top group can go up. First, the tank and then the healer will go up, after which the DPS will go up. While the spinners are coming down, the hunter and one range DPS should watch for where the spiderlings are spawning and start pre-trapping that location to get them down as soon as possible. Melee DPS will stay with the tank and get the spinners grouped up, then they will pull them to the drone who is spawning from the side of the room. Range DPS will continuously juggle the spiderlings and the engorged broodlings from their caves when they spawn. The melee DPS and tanks will cycle the spinners and the drones into one location of the room and cleave them down. If anybody gets fixated, make sure that you run away from the spiderlings and face the drone away from the group to avoid the frontal damage. While this is happening, the top group will move around the middle of the room and dodge meteors and fire on the ground. When the boss casts Smoldering Devastation, the top group goes down and you repeat this process 3 times. Once the third cast of Smoldering Devastation goes out, the entire group will aim to quickly kill any remaining spiderlings. Position the group in a triangle pattern, where the tanks are on opposite corners of the triangle and the raid is behind the boss. At this point, Beth'tilac should be around 75% HP. Start ramping up your damage by blowing offensive cooldowns while the BDK is holding the boss. Bloodlust after a short while, approximately when the boss is at 50% HP. Make sure that the off-tank taunts off the Widow's Kissed cast, and then the Blood DK can taunt the boss back afterwards. When the raid starts taking heavy damage and you are no longer able to stabilize using AoE heals, start cycling your raid cooldowns as well as tank defensives to ensure a stable state of the raid. Make sure that you are not overlapping any raid cooldowns, as all of these will be necessary in order to complete the encounter. For more details on this encounter, please watch the full breakdown available with the timestamps in the description. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the guide, and if you did, please make sure to leave a like and drop a comment and subscription on this channel.